Let the torch of freedom burn.
It's Good News Friday right here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for tuning in with us today. This is the intersection of faith and the culture. It's where we analyze things from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. Now, when I say things, I'm talking about the hot topics of the day, whatever's happening in the culture. We want to take that biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective. Well, on Fridays, we like to take a very positive outlook on things and just look at some of the good things that are happening. There's always bad things happening, and of course, in 2020, in the chaos of 2020, there's been plenty of bad, but there's also been a lot of good. And so Good News Friday is a chance for us to catch up on some of those good news stories you probably have not heard about, certainly not from the major media. And so I really enjoy these Friday programs here with David Barton. He's America's premier historian and our founder at WallBuilders. Tim Barton's got a stack of good news he's going to share with us. Tim's a national speaker and pastor. He's president here at WallBuilders. And my name is Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach. So let's dive into it. Let's get to some of that good news. David Barton's going to start us with the first piece of good news today.
Rick, I'm going to Iowa on this one, and I don't know, this may not be the right time of the year to go to Iowa. It's starting to get cold out there. Nonetheless, I'm going to Iowa. We now, for several weeks, have had school back in session, and several universities came back in session. A lot of them thought they'd be only online, but a number of them are doing in-person courses, and one of those universities is Iowa State University. So as the classes are getting started for the fall semester, the professors take the students they've got in class and say, here's the class, here's what's expected of you, here's the syllabus, here's what we're going to cover, etc. And one of the English professors, Professor Chloe Clark, in her English 250 class, so it's kind of an upper-level class, she gave in her syllabus what she called grounds for dismissal. And under grounds for dismissal, she will throw you out of her class if you do certain things. She had up top in all capital letters this huge thing that says a giant warning. And under giant warning, she listed the things that would get you dismissed from her class. Among those things that would get you dismissed from her class were any papers or projects that argued against killing unborn babies and abortions. So if you take a pro-life position, you are going to be dismissed from her class, at least if you take that position publicly. So she made that very clear, and she said, I'm going to throw you out if you do this. And there's just a little impediment to that called the First Amendment of the Constitution.
No. She was being tolerant, guys. This is fine. This is tolerance. You can kick people out for not believing what you believe if you do it in the name of tolerance. That's allowed.
Oh, she apparently was doing it to preserve tolerance and diversity in the classroom. And so
You
the
keep
diversity,
using that word. I don't think that word means what you think it means.
That's a great flashback. Yeah, good job, Rick. That's good. So, as you can imagine, there were First Amendment litigation groups that were ready to do something with it. But to the credit of Iowa State University, nobody had to go file suit. Iowa State heard about it, and they called her in and said, hey, here's the First Amendment. We're committed to the First Amendment. We're committed to the rights of students to exercise their rights under the First Amendment. This university recognizes the right of free speech, and you're not going to shut it down. That was the university itself without having to go through a lawsuit. Now, there could be several reasons for that. Maybe they've seen the several dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits over the last few years. I do not know of a single case where we've lost with students being able to express their viewpoint in colleges. I mean, we win those all over the place. And I say we, meaning the conservative side, the Alliance Defending Freedom and FIRE, and all these different groups that do this. And it could also be the fact that President Trump has recently issued a federal order that says any university that does not stand up for the rights of the First Amendment is going to lose its federal funding, such as things like Pell Grants and all the other things that they rely on. So, I would like to think that Iowa State University did this because they're committed to the Constitution and First Amendment. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that's why they did it. But if they had not gone that way, there was lawsuits ready to come at them, and there was President Trump's directive ready to take federal funding away. But the good news is that you can now have pro-life speech in this English class. So I've got another piece of pro-life good news that comes out of Missouri, and it deals with the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. The state of Missouri passed a pro-life law that's called an informed consent law. It says before a woman can have an abortion, there are certain things she needs to be informed about, just in case she's not aware of what happens with an abortion and what it does. And so the informed consent position says, here's what's about to happen to you, and here's an ultrasound so you can see what's about to be terminated within you. And so as part of what they had was not only ultrasound, etc. I'm reading from the law that whenever a woman goes to an abortion clinic, she has to certify in writing that she's had a chance to view an ultrasound at least 24 hours ahead of time. She doesn't have to see it, but she has a chance to look at it. And she just needs to fill out this form that says, yes, I had a chance to see an ultrasound if I wanted to, and that she also received an informed consent booklet. Now, she doesn't have to read that, but it's given to her. In the informed consent booklet that comes from the state of Missouri, it says that the life of each human being begins at conception, and abortion will terminate the life of a separate, unique, living human being. So understand, this is not just tissue, this is a living human being. And so these are things that are given out at the abortion clinics literally before an abortion can be done. Well, there was a Jane Doe from Satanic Temple, and the Satanic Temple may be the most aggressive group right now in challenging pro-life laws across the nation. They claim that anything that preserves that life violates their religious beliefs. As a matter of fact, it was explained in the pleadings of this case that this lady who is part of the Satanist temple believes that the human tissue she was carrying was part of her body and that she alone gets to decide what to do with it, regardless of the current or the future human of the human tissue within her. So her thing is, that's not a separate human individual being, that's part of me, and I get to decide until it becomes a separate human being, which is after it's born. So the state of Missouri says, no, that's a human being and it's separate and it's individual. She says, no, my religious beliefs say it's not. And so she went to court to get this struck down. The Satanic Temple has been somewhat successful in getting some of these state laws struck down, but the Eighth Circuit gave a unanimous decision that no, what the state of Missouri did is well within the right of the state to do that. It's not forcing you to avoid an abortion. It's giving you opportunity, and the state has a right to take a position on when life begins. Now, she appealed that, what's called en banc. In other words, 3 judges made the decision. She wants all 15 or 18 or however many. She wants them all to make the decision, and they all refused, said, nope, those 3 spoke for us. And so this stands. Now, why this is significant is this is the kind of law that once it gets on the path to the Supreme Court, this is the type of law that can overturn a Roe v. Wade. So what we have here is Missouri passed a law. The Federal Court of Appeal for the 8th Federal District Court of Appeals has upheld this, which means it's now going to be on its way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And if the U.S. Supreme Court picks up this case, this could be an opportunity to reverse Roe v. Wade. But again, this is how important federal judges are, and that's one of the big things at stake in this election. But good news on the pro-life front from a number of different parts of the nation.
All right, guys, quick break. We'll be back with more good news in just a moment. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. Many of you out there are under stay-at-home orders by your governor or your local health officials, and maybe you're looking for something to do during this time. One of the most important things you can do as a citizen is to make sure that you know your rights, you know when they've been violated, and you're the better prepared to defend and assert them. To do that, you've got to study the Constitution and the history behind it. Constitution Alive with David Barton and Rick Green does exactly that. We take you into the WallBuilders Library. We bring all those resources to life, and then we go out to Philadelphia to Independence Hall, and right there in the room where the Constitution and the Declaration were put together, we bring it to life, we relive it, and we make sure that we as citizens know what our part is in preserving these freedoms for future generations. At this time in our nation, it is so important to know the proper role of government and what we as citizens should be doing at this time. If you haven't done Constitution Alive, check it out at wallbuilders.com. You can get the DVD set there. We'll get it out in the mail to you as soon as we can, and you can study it at home. Or you can go to constitutioncoach.com and become a Constitution Coach today. We've got a free license for you right now where you can sign up as a Constitution host and be the catalyst in your community to bring back these biblical and historical and constitutional values. And what you do is you sign up as a host, and then you get your friends and family together on Zoom. We coach you on how to do it, and you're able to create community and also study the Constitution at the same time. Do this, and we will be able to pick up the pieces on the other side of this crisis and rebuild our nation even stronger than it was before. Check it out today at constitutioncoach.com. It's Good News Friday. Thanks for staying with us here on WallBuilders Live. Next piece of good news is coming from Tim Barton.
All right, guys, this one is coming from a medical journal, and the good news is a correction in the medical journal. We have talked before about the American Journal of Psychiatry. Last year, they came out with a study that said that a sex reassignment surgery was mentally, emotionally beneficial for the healthy well-being of what had been boy, girl, becoming now whatever they chose to be, as the case were, because in this American Journal of Psychiatry, however you feel and identify, that was kind of the most important thing. So the big deal was last fall, they came out with a study. Many of us at that time came out saying how ridiculous it was and it didn't make very much sense. What's interesting now is in August, they came out and they retracted the findings and they said, well, actually, upon further examination, we didn't find any improvement in the mental health, the emotional stability of the patients who underwent the sex reassignment surgery. Now, guys, this is a really big deal because this is one of the huge arguments from people on the left when they talk about the gender issue in general. One of the things that's been argued and lobbied is that in different healthcare, that actually part of kind of this Obamacare mandate that people should have to fund, they should have to provide and pay for sex reassignment surgeries. This was something that initially one of the ways that people argued that you could get this was you could sign up and join the military and you could join as a man and then you want to become a woman. And so you can have this sex reassignment surgery and the military will pay for it. And if the military is paying for it, that means that the taxpayers are paying for it because that's where that money comes from. So the fact that now this American Journal of Psychiatry is coming back and retracting their findings when they were so bold saying this is so good for the mental health of people who think they're something different than their natural biological makeup, it's now showing that no, actually that wasn't better for you. Now, guys, not to be crass, but I could have told any guy the most beneficial thing for your mental health is not going to be cutting off part of your member, right? Like, that's just the most idiotic thing ever. And yet this is what is being promoted. And actually we're seeing this even being promoted in schools for children, where we can have these pills that you can take and these gender blockers, and then you can get a sex reassignment surgery. It is utter... I'm trying to think of the Christian term, right, to describe this. It's utter insanity and lunacy.
Foolishness. That out of Proverbs, we'd use a lot of foolishness here.
Foolishness, right, that we are discussing here. With all that being said, the really good news is that one of these really kind of academic places that have been the defense and the promoter, defender of some of these thoughts and ideas now have just had to recant and recall their position because it doesn't actually show what they thought it was going to show. So that's the really good news, is that the American Journal of Psychiatry has taken back their position they came out with last fall.
I got a quick break. We'll come back. More good news, and David Barton's up next, so stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live.
Hi friends, this is Tim Barton of WallBuilders. This is a time when most Americans don't know much about American history or even heroes of the faith, and I know oftentimes for parents, we're trying to find good content for our kids to read, and if you remember back to the Bible, to the book of Hebrews, it has the Faith Hall of Fame where they outlined the leaders of faith that had gone before them. Well, this is something that as Americans, we really want to go back and outline some of these heroes, not just of American history, but heroes of Christianity and our faith as well. I want to let you know about some biographical sketches we have available on our website. One is called the Courageous Leaders Collection. In this collection, it includes people like Abigail Adams, Abraham Lincoln, Francis Scott Key, George Washington Carver, Susanna Wesley, even the Wright brothers. And there's a second collection called Heroes of History. In this collection, you'll read about people like Benjamin Franklin or Christopher Columbus, Daniel Boone, George Washington, Harriet Tubman. Friends, the list goes on and on. This is a great collection for your young person to have and read, and it's a providential view of American and Christian history. This is available at wallbuilders.com. That's www.wallbuilders.com.
Welcome back to WallBuilders Live. David Barton's got our next piece of good news. David, where are we headed?
Well, we're going to look international for a little bit. Started the first segment that I did with 2 stories on pro-life. Now I'm going pro-life international. And we've talked several times on the program across the years about how that really several nations in Eastern Europe, young Christian nations, are trying to become godly kind of nations, have good policies. We talked about how Estonia, when they came out from under Soviet control, they ended abortion, and they actually minted coins with unborn children showing on the front of the coins to remind them that they're pro-life. We've seen that Poland, for example, has been so strong and going in favorable directions that the nation banned abortion in a referendum. They also said, we want to go back to keeping a Sabbath. We want Sunday to be the Sabbath. And so we've seen these nations doing that. We've seen with Romania. Romania is really trying hard. Czech Republic's doing a good job. You have Ukraine that's starting to emerge out from under the Soviet Union. They're doing a great job. They're about 90% Christian, and they're trying to figure out how to make Christian values work with politics. And they've never been involved really in politics. It's all been Russian, and so now they're trying to figure it out. But all that to say, the Czech Republic, one of those nations that's really trying to learn to do the right thing, they, for the third time, have now rejected euthanasia. Euthanasia in the Czech Republic is classified as murder. They believe that life comes from God and that you don't take life away, that God does. He's the one who takes life. So the traditional standing has been for 5,000 years in the Judeo-Christian community, Jewish and Christian, that suicide is just not right. God is the one who has the keys of life and death, not us. And you don't take your own life. Your life belongs to Him. You leave that to something other than yourself. And so euthanasia, like suicide, has been something that's not been accepted. So they first rejected it in 2008. Then in 2016, they came back for a second time trying to pass euthanasia. Country rejected that. And now they just recently did it again, and the country again rejected it. So that's 3 times. So they're really getting stronger in their beliefs and convictions, but they've maintained this position for a number of years, which is really good. The other place I'll go internationally is going to South America. If you remember back, you remember a guy named Chavez? Something related to Venezuela or something of the sort.
Hugo or Caesar, or there's some kind of something
in there. And he had a very, very prosperous nation at one point. I think it was called Venezuela.
Well, we know how to fix that.
Yeah, we put him in charge. He made it a socialist nation, and now it is mired in poverty. And I mean, in a few short years, it went from being one of the most prosperous nations in South America to being one of the in the basement.
Well, so one thing that we could point out, unlike at the end of The Price is Right, when the host would always remind people, hey, don't forget to have your pets spayed and neutered. In Venezuela, they actually encourage you have as many pets as you can because we're going to eat them later. Probably not a great thing. Nonetheless, it's a different kind of issue down there.
Yeah, they're so starving for food. The pets are now food. But back when Chavez was on top of this great mountain of Venezuela, who was such an economic powerhouse and where they were with energy and everything else, he created the Union of South American Nations. Now, it was founded in 2008, and that's when, again, Venezuela was kind of at the top of everything. And so it had a number of member nations in it from South America. And, of course, who didn't want to be with a very prosperous nation at that time? And they were. Well, since then, we've seen what socialism did to Venezuela. We've seen what's done to other nations. And so in the past 3, 4, 5 years, there's been a real change down there. And what you've seen is that this Union of South American Nations is now changing. And so they now have replaced it with what they call Forum for the Progress of South America. And all of these are the newly elected leaders of so many of the different countries down there, Brazil and Argentina and Chile and Colombia. All these countries have moved very much to the right in their politics, away from the leftist socialist stuff. And they are free market, they are individual rights, they are Republican democratic forms of government, and their nations are prospering. And so they have replaced that Hugo Chavez socialistic model. They've rejected that. And so now that they've got this new organization started, it's interesting that across South America, all these nations are jumping out of what used to be Chavez's group and coming to this new group. Paraguay and Peru and Ecuador and all these other nations are moving in the direction of what we would call kind of what we hold as standard in America, and that's a free market, or what we used to hold as standard. Maybe it's not as standard as it was, but a free market and individual and inalienable rights and a Republican form of government with elected representatives. So that's good news that really this belief in what we have in the Declaration of Independence, God-given rights, and we didn't create it. God already had it before then. We just articulated it. But those beliefs are starting to spread across the world at a much faster rate than we've seen in recent years, and that's great.
Very good news. One final break, guys. When we come back, it'll be our last piece of good news for the day. Stay with us. You're listening to WallBuilders Live. The Founding Fathers of America made a habit of reading through the Bible once a year. There's no better source of wisdom, and it is applicable to every issue in our lives. What a great time for us as American citizens to take this time. If you've got extra time at home now, if you're quarantined at home and you're looking for something to do, what better thing could there be to do than to read through the Bible, maybe for the first time in your life? I tried to make this a habit several years ago, and I had a new tool to start doing that with, and it was called the Founders Bible. It gave me a chance not only to read through the Bible once a year, but also to learn history while I was doing that. And what I love about the Founders Bible is that as I'm reading that scripture, then all of a sudden there'll be an article inserted right there by that scripture about what the founding fathers learned from that specific verse or chapter and how they applied it to launch our nation. It's a really fun way to learn. It's incredibly empowering, and it has answers for today. The Bible is full of all the right answers for today. In fact, it's the only source that has all the right answers. So if you haven't read through the Founders Bible, I challenge you and encourage you, get a copy of the Founders Bible today. It's available at wallbuilders.com, and we even have it a digital version, so you can do this on your phone or iPad or computer. Check out the Founders Bible today. Make it a part of your regular reading throughout the year, but right now is a great opportunity to read through the Founders Bible. Check it out today at wallbuilders.com. We're back on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us for our final segment of good news today. And Tim's going to take us home with a great piece of good news. Not just good news, Tim. This one's got to be great news. That's how we have to finish every Friday now.
Well, I'm going to double up to hopefully make two goods a great. So we'll see how we do.
Right.
So both of these come from Louisville, Kentucky, which is not always the place I think of great, but we're going to try. So two really good things happened in Louisville. One of them in relation to pro-lifers. There was a city vote on an ordinance that was going to be a buffer zone outside of different health facilities, and health being kind of in quotations. If we're talking about abortion, it's not really a health facility, but that's kind of what Planned Parenthood and some of these places argue, is that these abortion providers are providing health care, and the argument was that you're not allowed to have protests or riots or whatever else outside these healthcare or medical facilities, and specifically it was targeting these pro-life groups. So the good news is that this ordinance was rejected. Now, it's a little iffy because it was rejected 13-12. So it very much was closer than it should have been. And actually some of the members of the city council who voted on this pointed out that, look, if what you're saying is true, then in the sense of if this ordinance went into effect, then I could not go stand on the sidewalk and hold the Bible and just pray quietly on the Bible, or I could be viewed as violating this and could be arrested and taken to jail, even if I'm not stopping or talking to anybody. So the whole ordinance was a problem. So the good news is it was rejected and overturned. What struck me as interesting in this article was that in opposition, Planned Parenthood was one of the groups there lobbying for the buffer zone, saying that we don't want people to come and try to interfere with our medical practice. Which, again, just the irony of some of these thoughts and statements is crazy. They blame the city council for failing to prioritize patient safety. So by allowing pro-lifers to be out on the sidewalk and encourage people to maybe consider adoption or something else other than abortion, that was putting patient safety at risk, which is crazy. But good news is that ordinance did not go into effect. Second thing from Louisville, this relates to a photographer who had a lawsuit brought against her. Her name is Chelsea Nelson, and she opted not to perform, or in this case, photograph a same-sex wedding because she's an individual and said, it's not really the kind of stuff I want to do. So they brought lawsuit against her because she's discriminating. So U.S. District Judge Justin Walker came out and he wrote that a government can no more compel freelance speechwriter to write for a political candidate she opposes. So we couldn't tell a writer to write, like if it's a Democrat writer, we couldn't say, nope, you have to write for Donald Trump if he hires you. Of course not. You have the freedom of your speech, the freedom of your expression. So this is the case he makes for Chelsea Nelson. What's interesting is Judge Walker knew this was going to be appealed. So part of his decision is actually a response to the appeal that's going to be coming. And he says that this was not a violation. It was not a discrimination because this wasn't like a McDonald's refusing to serve a hamburger to someone because they're homosexual. It wasn't like a hotel refusing to give an empty or a vacant room to someone because they were lesbian. This was related to speech, and speech is different than maybe some kind of a generic food industry service, etc. But he actually acknowledges the appeal. that will likely come and why that appeal should not stand from a constitutional basis. I'm out of time to cover more, but it's just really cool to see that there is a district judge not only protecting Chelsea Nelson's right of expression in her private practice, her private business, but also acknowledging some of the challenges that undoubtedly Planned Parenthood and these others will bring and why they don't have the constitutional basis to compel Chelsea to take photographs that she does not want to take.
Well, we're out of time for good news today, but there is a lot more at our website. Be sure and check that out at wallbuilderslive.com. There in the archive section, you can get Good News Friday programs, Foundations of Freedom Thursday programs, and interviews throughout the week. We're also sharing some of our Constitution Alive material. That's our Constitution class that you can teach in your church, in your living room, online through Zoom. We're sharing some of that here on WallBuilders Live, several of those lessons in the last couple of months. We've got more coming up in the next few weeks. And if you'd like to host a Constitution class, be sure and check out constitutioncoach.com. That's the place where you can sign up for free right now. In 2020, we're giving all of this away so that you can host those Constitution classes and get people educated. It's a great way to be the catalyst for a restoration of biblical and constitutional principles. You be the one to do that. There's so much that you can do by hosting these classes. It's a great way to get involved. Back to wallbuilderslive.com, that website, there's several things you're going to find there, that archive section, all those great programs, but that's also the place where you can contribute, and that's such an important part of this. You know, the founders gave lives, fortunes, and sacred honor. We have to invest in freedom, and we're a listener-supported program, so all of you out there that donate on a monthly basis or once a year, we really appreciate you. Thanks for investing in freedom by investing in WallBuilders Live. We encourage you, if you haven't done that, to check it out at wallbuilderslive.com and become a part of that team. Come alongside us. Lock shields with us. Help us restore America's constitutional republic. Thanks so much for listening today to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided.